On a night in May 1941, when London's lights were going out due to air raids and Berlin's front maps were being redrawn in pencil, the world was just a few decisions away from a different reality, and no one understood it. History as we know it rests on a fragile set of failures and successes, and if you remove a single failure, the chain of events begins to roll like a stone down a hill, accelerating with each blow. In this version of the world, Germany doesn't just almost win. It wins so much that the Allies have no room to maneuver, and the most terrifying thing here isn't even the victory itself, but how quickly it transforms into a new order that seems inevitable to people. The point of divergence is simple and brutal. In the summer of 1940, Hitler doesn't postpone the destruction of the British air system or switch to symbolic strikes on cities, but rather carries out a plan that had in reality been started and thwarted, methodically for weeks, attacking radar, airfields, repair bases, fuel depots, and chains of command, depriving Britain of the ability to replace its losses. This isn't one battle. It's a grinding grind where every day is like the last. Alarms, sirens, smoke trails in the sky, pilots who return less and less frequently, and controllers forced to close sectors not out of panic, but because of the mathematics of aircraft and trained personnel becoming insufficient. Within a few weeks, the skies over southeast England no longer look like a field that can be held, and then the next domino effect occurs. Ships enter the English Channel, which the British actually feared precisely because they couldn't be ignored if the air was lost. The landing isn't romantic or a snapshot. It's chaos, mud, fire, and 1,000 small decisions on the beaches and roads. But one key point is at play. Germany gains a foothold large enough to force Britain to make a choice it never actually had to make. In London, talk of resilience continues, but in the shelters, people whisper something else. What if this is the end? Newspapers are empty due to censorship. Rumors spread faster than official reports. Familiar goods disappear from the markets, and the word evacuation begins to sound less like a plan and more like a death sentence. The British leadership understands that a protracted war, with control of the skies lost and the capital threatened, could end not in a heroic legend but in the disintegration of the state. Under this pressure, something emerges that will shape subsequent history more powerfully than any tank: compromise. Britain doesn't become a German province, in the literal sense, but it signs a peace that removes it from the war, seals a new map of influence in Europe, and leaves the country with a sense of defeat, a feeling that isn't formalized by the word capitulation, but lives in the people's eyes, in the silence of veterans, in the changed tone of the radio. And now the dominoes are truly accelerating. Without the British Isles as an airfield, without the British fleet as a constant threat, without British support for resistance on the continent, Germany gains a free hand in the east, and the time it is sorely lacking. At the same time, one of the main bridges for American aid to Europe disappears. The United States remains at a distance, continues to provide economic assistance, strengthens its navy, but politically, society sees the war as a European tragedy, one it doesn't want to engage in until there's a direct attack. And there may not be a direct attack, because in this world, Germany is taking the next rational step. It doesn't haphazardly expand the war, but consolidates its victory. In the spring of 1941, when Germany launches Operation Barbarossa in reality, with planning errors and an underestimation of its resources, everything looks different here. It has more aircraft, more fuel, more confidence, and most importantly, more rear support, because the Western Front has all but disappeared. The offensive against the USSR remains monstrously difficult. The distances and weather remain. But now Germany has greater capacity to maintain momentum, and every remaining day of summer translates into additional kilometers, captured warehouses, destroyed communication centers, and disrupted factory evacuations. In the fall of 1941, when Moscow holds out in our story, the situation here becomes critical. German troops are approaching closer and earlier, and the Soviet leadership is forced to make decisions under conditions where time is running out. The evacuation of the government becomes not a contingency plan, but a necessity, and this undermines morale in the capital. Rumors that the city might be abandoned turn into fear that corrodes order. At some point, not overnight, but like a widening crack, the system of governance begins to falter. Regions operate with increasing autonomy. Supplies collapse. The front holds in places, retreats in others. And Germany does what it always does when victorious: transforms a military victory into a political one. Puppet administrations emerge, promises of autonomy are made, a struggle for the population's loyalty ensues, the adversaries are divided, and this produces another domino effect. The war in the East begins to disintegrate into multiple wars: the front, partisan warfare, civil conflicts, the elites struggle for survival. And then comes a moment that is difficult to imagine, but the logic of the chain leads precisely there. The USSR loses the ability to wage war on its previous scale and is forced to seek a pause. This isn't necessarily an unconditional surrender in the cinematic sense. It could be a ceasefire, a division of territory, a shift of the border far to the east, the de facto disintegration of the country into governable zones. For millions of people, this means one thing: the familiar world collapses, and in its place arises a new power, new rules, new fears. By 1942, Europe has become a continent where Germany dictates terms not only by force, but also by administration. Borders are redrawn, governments are replaced or subjugated, the economy is restructured to favor the center, and trains traveling to and from the east carry not tourists but resources and people whose destinies are not decided by them. What happens next when one player gains almost the entire continent? They begin to build a system to hold it. Victory in war does not mean peace. It means control, and control requires an apparatus: police, intelligence, propaganda, economic planning, and inevitably repression. A new normal emerges in the cities: posters, parades, obligatory rituals of loyalty, cautious conversations in kitchens, quiet hatred in queues, and a fear that people hide even from their neighbors. But at the same time, another side is emerging. A portion of the population, tired of hunger and the chaos of war, clings to stability because stability seems like salvation. And this is precisely what makes the system more resilient than it appears from the outside. Europe is gradually getting used to the winner, and this is perhaps the most dismal aspect. Violence becomes a background noise, like the sound of rain that is no longer noticed, and the new elite receives benefits, positions, contracts, protection, and begins to defend the system because it has become their life. Meanwhile, the United States faces a reality where liberating Europe has no basis. There is no Britain as a fortress, no front that can be opened without colossal risk, and technological and economic rivalry is turning into a different kind of Cold War, not the United States against the USSR, but the United States against continental Europe under German control. The question becomes different. Is it even possible to break such a system without all-out war? And here comes the next key domino: the race for technology and resources. Germany, having gained access to the continent's industry and resource zones in the East, is able to fund research and accelerate developments that were in reality limited by time and the chaos of the fronts. Jet aircraft, missiles, new means of communication, all of this develops faster, not because Wunderwaffes are saving the world, but because the state has years to turn ideas into mass-produced projects and has all of Europe as a production base. The United States responds in kind: science, industry, secret programs, and the world enters an era where fear once again becomes the main currency. Only this time, not because of nightly bombings of cities, but because of the understanding that the next war could be so devastating that no one will win. Somewhere in the mid-1940s, a new front line emerges, not on the map of trenches, but in politics, intelligence, economics, and in the souls of people. It contains spies, defectors, underground movements, factory sabotage, secret radio broadcasts, information smuggling, and a slow but constant struggle for what is becoming a dangerous word in this Europe: freedom. Resistance doesn't disappear, it changes. It becomes a network, not an army, and lives in the details. A leaflet left on a tram, a damaged component on an assembly line, a careless gesture that could lead to disappearance. And all the while, the new system tries to appear eternal, because any empire, after victory, wants to appear invincible. But there's a problem that victory doesn't solve: Governing a vast territory requires compromise, and ideology abhors compromise. The farther from the center, the greater the friction. Different languages, different traditions, different economic interests, and even if force can suppress protest, force cannot compel people to sincerely believe. Germany is beginning to build a European order, but this order is maintained through constant control, and control burns up resources. The economy may grow, but it grows like a tree in an iron cage, formally tall but with cracks inside. The black market becomes the shadow of the official market, corruption the shadow of ideology, and fear the shadow of stability. And yet, many live outwardly normal lives. They go to work, raise children, listen to music, argue about prices, because people can adapt to the terrible when that terribleness has become everyday. That's why this world is so dangerous. It doesn't necessarily look like a continuous nightmare every day. It looks like a world where the nightmare is built into the system. The rhetorical question here is quiet, but it lingers. If continental Europe came under a single control and the war ended, does this mean history has stopped? No. History has only changed shape. In the 1950s and 1960s, the world in this version increasingly resembles two enormous fortresses facing each other across the ocean and across lines of influence in neutral regions, one American, the other German-European. Colonial territories become a battleground for economies and intelligence services because direct confrontation is too risky. Developing countries receive aid, loans, weapons, and along with them, pressure to choose a side. Propaganda speaks in different languages. Some speak of order and civilization, others of freedom and rights, and both sides hide their fears behind beautiful words. And inside Europe, beneath the surface, what empires always fear most slowly grows: generational change. People who remember the war may fear chaos and value stability. People born victory after sea control is a prison, because for them, it's not salvation, but a ceiling. Their rebellion begins not with tanks, but with culture, with music, books, conversations, with the question, why does it have to be this way? A question that can't be walled off. The system responds as usual, with bans, arrests, and exemplary discipline. But every ban makes the forbidden more attractive, and every arrest turns a person into a symbol. And this is what the domino effect leads to. Having won the war, Germany gains a vast empire, but along with it comes the endless need to maintain it, expend energy on control, suppress dissent, justify violence, and balance an economy that works as long as people are afraid and as long as the center doesn't make too many mistakes. Any error in such a structure becomes not just an error, but a crack in the foundation. At some point, the cracks accumulate: economic pressure, resistance, international isolation, the technological race, societal fatigue, and suddenly what was hidden by posters and marches becomes visible. An empire built on fear does not become eternal. It simply postpones its crisis, making it deeper. The ending of this alternative history is powerful not because it contains a single final battle, but because it reveals a pattern. If Germany won World War II, the world did not receive the end of history. It received a long, cold, and dangerous era of two giants, where Europe became a showcase of order, and simultaneously a laboratory of control, where freedom became an underground word and fear, the usual weather, and where the main lesson sounds brutally clear. It is easier to win a war than to win time, because time always demands from the winner a price for what he made the norm.